This documentary is to commemorate all the unsung heroes throughout the history of diving, starting with the earliest recorded attempts to get man underwater and safely back to terra firma. The list of those who pushed forward the boundaries of depth and duration reads like an attempt at Mission Impossible. Died in the attempt. Successful attempt, died on return to the surface. Fatal decompression, and so on. But some great successes, like the 600-foot record Hard Hat dive by George Wookey in 1956, which still stands to this day, were achieved. Man's first endeavours to enter Earth's watery inner space goes back many centuries. Alexander the Great, seen depicted here from a manuscript in France. But it was in the 15th century that serious thought was brought into play in the person of the great artist Leonardo da Vinci, not only applying his artistic talent, but a very astute and inquiring mind. See some of his early drawings. He discovered the limitations of the snorkel and designed the diving suit, which has been successfully tried out in recent times. It is interesting to note that after the sinking of the Mary Rose, Henry VIII's flagship, on the 19th of July 1545, Venetian divers were sent for to try and salvage her. What these divers wore could quite possibly have been based on Leonardo da Vinci's ideas. Other successes were the arrangement and design shown of Lethbridge and Rose diving machines. In the hands of their designers, these proved to be of great use in recovery of sunken treasure and ordnance, guns, etc. Some bizarre designs were thought up, some of which had potential, whilst others, looking impressive, were of no use at all. Men such as Trewall, Halley of Halley's Comet fame, and Klingert in the 17th and 18th century followed the very successful principle of diving from a submerged diving bell arrangement, a method used in modern commercial diving today. It was eventually acknowledged that there are two distinct methods by which man can explore and work in the deep water, one more convenient than the other, giving the diver more freedom underwater, but with penalties which require serious management to keep the diver safe. This is known as saturation diving, where the diver is subjected to the pressure of the water, which requires the diver to breathe air or gas at the same pressure, creating the potential for developing the bends, a condition which results from the body being saturated with gas solution, which at surface pressure 14.7 pounds per square inch would be gaseous, which if not controlled in the diver's body would cause nitrogen bubbles to form in the diver's bloodstream and tissue, hence the name saturation diving. This condition is well understood today, but many divers were killed in the past. The other method requires great cumbersome machines, some of which operate like human limbs and legs, and others which are simply pressure resistant vessels with viewing ports. The main difference with this equipment is that the diving machine resists the external pressure of the water, allowing the diver to breathe surface atmospheric pressure, 14.7 pounds per square inch as referred to earlier, totally eliminating the risk of bends or any other pressure related physical effect. The downside is that the machine needs to be very strong, yet allow visual communication with objects outside in the water environment, and also have the power to contact and manipulate objects. This method is known as atmospheric diving and atmospheric machines, and many successful ones exist today which can operate down to over 1,000 feet. But to take us back to the history of deeper diving, the Royal Navy, concerned with submarine rescue, pushed forward the limits using Seabighorn and Hard Hats. hence George Wookie's record dive to 600 foot referred to earlier. Many earlier attempts were made also. Others pushing the limits were Arne Zatterstrom, using Hardat and mixed gas to eliminate nitrogen narcosis, a condition caused through the toxicity of gas solution in the system, creating a drunken state. He completed a successful dive only to die on returning to the surface due to the surface crew's incompetence. Jacques Fox, a French scuba diver, testing the effects of nitrogen narcosis again, died because he removed his breathing set under the influence of nitrogen narcosis. And another, Peter Small of Selby, who died attempting the first 1,000 foot dive, working from a diving chamber on oxyhelium mixture. His companion and inventor of the system survived. But to get back to the development of Seabegomme and Hardat, the Dean brothers were born around the turn of the 18th and 19th century. Charles the Elder and John, at some point in the early 19th century, so the story goes, were involved in a fire where horses were trapped in their stable. And Charles Dean, being of an inventive mind, acquired a helmet from a suit of armour to which he inserted a long hose with the other end attached to a set of bellows. With this equipment, Charles rescued the horses. Such is the story. But we do know that Charles took out a patent for a firefighting helmet on the 20th of November 1823, and after some time developed this to function underwater, and eventual great success, and they and their helmet became the standard diving dress used solely by them for salvage and construction work. They worked on the Royal George in the 1830s, and whilst John Dean was working on the Royal George, he was asked to dive on a location where fishermen were snagging their nets. The location was in the Solent between the Isle of Wight and Portsmouth Harbour. What he discovered proved to be the Mary Rose, Henry VIII's flagship, sunken there on the 19th of July 1545, again referred to earlier. After such successes, a man named Augustus Seeb bought the patent from the Dean brothers and developed what we now know as the Seabegomme and Hardat. Seeb met an engineer named Gorman, and between them they established the Seabegomme Company. This very successful equipment was developed in the 1870s and was standard dress until the 1990s, when it was decommissioned. What a great record. About the time of the Dean brothers, other equipment was invented by French engineers Denis and Rocquerolles. But though an efficient piece of equipment, it never achieved the Hardat status. Sports diving was a great influence on diving development. In 1943, Cousteau, a French engineer, along with another gas engineer, Émile Gagnon, developed and patented the demand valve, naming it the SG, after Seabegomme, the first company to produce his diving equipment. This piece of equipment, which regulated air pressure from a high pressure cylinder to the pressure of the surrounding atmosphere, which allowed divers to breathe freely and automatically at whatever depth they named their invention the Aqualung. Using this, with the Frogman's gear developed during World War II, they opened up the sports diving industry. Clubs were formed throughout the world, but mainly in the United Kingdom, where the British Sub-Aqua Club was formed first in London, then in Oldham, Lancashire, and now it is the largest sports diving club in the world. Even the Practical Mechanics magazine in the 1950s illustrated how to make your own aqualung. Great progress was made through the demands of the oil industry and sports diving industry. During World War II, C.B. Gorman Company produced and designed, through their chief engineer Robert Davis, many forms of diving dress to take underwater warfare to the enemy, including the human torpedo equipment, submarine rescue equipment and frogman attire. Commander Ian Fraser VC, a midget submarine commander and naval frogman, introduced the civilian people to the underwater adventures, with exhibitions at Bellevue Zoo, Manchester, and later being part of a team introducing scuba diving at the Council of Physical Recreation to be approved as a British sport. This was in the 1950s. But to finish this account and to bring the history up to date, we must consider some of the present day achievements. Man can now dive relatively safely to extreme depths using submersibles. There's no ocean in the world that man cannot plumb to the deepest point. First of all, it started off with Barton and Beebe in a small spherical bathysphere, as they called it, and they plumbed half a mile deep into the ocean. But following this, great inventions were made, and the bathyscape, invented by Pickard, could plumb 7 miles of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in any ocean. So man has come full circle. He can also dive using saturation diving, because we now understand a great deal about decompression. So men who work on the oil rigs down hundreds of feet, breathing mixed gases on occasion, oxy, helium and so on, and even in sports diving nowadays we have this kind of equipment. So this has brought us all the way through with my potted history of diving, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you. This is a demonstration of what is known as dressing in a C.B. Gorman diver. Now I'll comment on the video as it goes along. The man in the blue hat is Ernie Croft, ex-Royal Navy diver, and the one in the foreground tying the boots is Ty Burton. The one sat down that you saw earlier in the red jersey is Phil Thurtle, and Phil and Ty own the equipment that we're using in this demonstration. Now, before the diver has his boots tied on, he needs to climb into this rubberized canvas suit through the neck seal. Now, the neck seal is a wide open seal with an inner seal and an outer rubber seal with holes in. Now you've got to pass what is known as the corselet that you can see in Ernie's hands there, under the rubberized seal, and on top of the seal inside the suit, the bottom seal. The rubberized one has got to be pulled over the top and the holes passed over the lugs, the threaded lugs that are attached to the corselet. When these are over and fitted in place, seating properly, they've got to have clamps attached, brass clamps with holes in that correspond to the lugs, and these clamps hold the rubberized seal down against the seal inside, and we've got a watertight joint. Also on the corselet is a threaded portion at the top, which coincides with the threaded portion on the helmet, which is quartered, so only a quarter turn enables it to lock tight onto its own seal. So and there is a little catch at the back that fixes this in place, stops the helmet coming unscrewed. Now here you see the clamps being put in place over the studs,
and you'll eventually see the screws being attached. Now these screws are tightened down by a special spanner which slips at a certain torque, which prevents over tightening but also allows it to be tight enough to create a seal. Now in the background you can see two people operating a CB Gorman cylinder pump which pumps air down to the diver. There's another one over to the right out of the picture which they will be using when the diver goes down. Now here you see them putting on the nuts, and you'll eventually see the spanner being used to tighten them up. The last nuts to be tightened are the ones on the shoulders which join the two individual pieces together, as well as help to seal against the rubber seal. There is also a skirt inside the collar which, if water did get in, it would go inside this collar and not down inside the suit. This collar is pulled up before the helmet is fitted. So you see them using the spanner to tighten the nuts. Now after this, the next piece of equipment that will go on will bring into play the lugs, the other lugs on the corselet that you can just see there. There's two at the front and two at the back. These are to contain the crutch strap. This is a piece of equipment that is attached to the back lugs. Ernie there is attempting to attach them to the lugs at the back. These come between the legs with a buttle on. Once this is attached, the buttle can be tightened to suit individual divers. In fact, this suit fits any diver. Ernie at the back, you can see how different he is in height. He could fit in this suit. Now this crutch strap is tightened and it pulls the corselet and the helmet down onto the shoulders. The surplus material is tucked up under the corselet, as you can see. It's important that this is comfortably tightened for obvious reasons, as well as holding the helmet down on the shoulders. Someone like Ernie, if air got in the helmet and that strap hadn't been tightened sufficient, the helmet would float almost completely off his head. Now we're fitting the knife. This is a CB Gorman diver's knife, and it's got a brass scabbard. Very important piece of equipment. If diver gets tangled or in nets, it could be the only means that he could get himself out of it. Now they're pulling the collar up now to make sure it's into the helmet space. And here we see the hose. The red one is the air pipe and the black one is the intercom. Now divers before, many years ago, who didn't have intercom, had to have a rope attached to which they could signal to the surface and vice versa what their needs were. Here you see them tightening the helmet onto this quarter screw, putting the catch down at the back. Now on the right, the left, as we look at it, side of the helmet, there is a valve which is an exhaust valve. If you shut that down, underwater the suit fills with air to a greater degree and you can make yourself buoyant. Open it up and you will feel the full weight down there. The weight of here you see them putting a 40-pound weight on the chest of the diver, and there's one goes on the back. The overall weight of the equipment is approximately 180 pounds over body weight, so considerably heavy. You saw the light blue mechanism at the back. That's the intercom. This is checked before the diver goes down. A much better procedure than tugging on ropes. Once the weights are fastened, the diver is carrying the full weight of the equipment, 180 pounds. When he's in the water, as I said earlier, he's much more buoyant. These weights have got to be tied on. There are hooks on the corselet, and you pass the ropes over these hooks, and on the helmet, I mean, and down to the weights, and they're skewered from the back as well. So the weight is taken on the shoulders from the corselet and the helmet. Now you see them tying the hose. The hose and the intercom have got to be tied in a certain way. The hose are passed under the arm of the diver and the loop goes over his back. This is to prevent any force being pulled directly onto the helmet, possibly pulling the diver backwards. The diver has a hold of the hose and can control the situation. Now you see Ernie passing it over his shoulder to tie. It's tied in a special way that is easily unfastened once the diver has come back to surface. Now you see Ernie doing the special knot which holds it secure during the dive, but then is easy to take apart later. And here you can now see Ty is fitting the faceplate. Once that is in place and sealed, the diver is totally watertight. Only his hands are open to the water when he is underwater. The valve you can see manipulating there is known as a spit valve. It's supposed to help if the faceplate is misted over. You can get water in your mouth and squirt it on the faceplate. Mainly used for getting rid of excess air in the suit. Now we see the diver taking the full 180 pounds weight while he goes down the ladder. Once he gets in the water, he's in a different situation, can make himself quite buoyant. Nice clear water in this location, so we can see the fish and we can see the rocks, and you will go down with the diver and we'll see what the diver sees underwater. Just in the valve. We're now turning to move into the deeper water. 40 feet is about the limit you could get to on this particular dive, and quite a pleasant dive with the clarity of the water. Just a glance at the diver at the bottom of the ladder before he sets off. There you see an instant where the hose actually did get trapped under a boulder. It wasn't contrived, this, it did happen, but the diver soon got himself out of it. There you see more of it. When he came back, he found he couldn't move his hose, so he had to go back to the boulder. You're seeing now what the diver sees. The occasional fish. But usually divers, working divers in harbours and so on, haven't got the pleasure of this visibility. It's usually very dark and he can only work by feel and touch. You see the diver now, he's come back, he's in quite shallow water, you can see his head near the surface, but he's preparing to come back to the ladder after the dive. You can see the valve where it's exhausting air to the surface there. He looks around, he sees his hose fast under the rock. He goes back to it and easily releases it. But there are scuba divers down there who could assist in any major things happen, unlike the men of yesteryear who didn't have this facility. Good shot of the diver there as he approaches the ladder. Making sure the ladder won't slip. It's well fixed at the bottom. Before he ascends, and this brings the dive to an end, the end of the demonstration. You see the diver now feeling the full weight of the 180 pounds. Now he's come out of the water